Good morning and welcome to another of the Talk Wildlife Skype interviews. Today I've got with me Dan Bradbury. He's from the World Land Trust, a charity that I sort of think back to around about 1999-2000 was actually a massive trigger for me starting up Talk Wildlife initially. So I've sort of known Dan and I've known John and World Land Trust and the work they do for a long time. And believe me, it's an exceptional charity and it does exceptional work. So first of all, hello, Dan. How are you?
I'm very well, Alan. How are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you. Very good. Enjoying sitting in, not.
No, it's not my favourite thing to be doing.
Yeah, during prime migration time, let's just sit in. I'm getting to know my garden like you wouldn't believe, though.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So that's my bit of world land.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've all got a little space, and I think we're now kind of realising how important those things are and how important the natural world is to us as well. So.
Too right, absolutely. Well, we'll end it there. That was fantastic.
Yeah, it's done. Let's go. Let's finish.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the World Land Trust. I want to talk to you about the annual review and talk around that. But before we do that, can you just give us a little bit of background so that we can put into context what the World Land Trust is and how it operates, and then we'll come into the annual review.
Yeah, no problem. So for anybody who doesn't know, so the World Land Trust, we're a conservation organisation. We're based in Halesworth in Suffolk, so small market town, which generally people visit if they're passing through to places like Minsmere and Southwold and things like that. So we're based there. It was founded by John and Viv Burton, who did an amazing job of raising a profile of conservation, certainly the importance of land. So they founded it in 1989 in their spare room, which actually I think was in Saxmundham. And then we've been in Halesworth. It's kind of we're a relatively small team, mixed people, mixed backgrounds in terms of conservation and conservation funding. So it's something that John was very keen on, that there was a mixture of people with different skills. So, I don't come from the traditional conservation background. I was the designer and designed packaging, for the bad guys designing packaging. And basically the philosophy hasn't changed in the entire time. It's some of the very first projects. It's just been about protecting land and protecting species and everything that's in it. We think that land is the most important part. And the more I've been involved and the longer I've been with the trust, I absolutely believe in that philosophy, actually, is putting that land under protection. And not only is it good for biodiversity, it's also good for the communities, but also it's got a real positive impact on climate. So protecting standing forest, what better thing can you do?
Yeah, and that was sort of hammered home to me when I interviewed Lee from Regua the other day. Clearly, I was in touch with what they were doing, but to actually sort of talk through, their reforestation, their wetland conservation and all the rest of it, and see the pictures and see how it's developed and see the species that are moving back in, which of course you guys are very closely related to that project.
Yeah,
it's right. Look after the land and everything that's in it will be protected. And what we'll do is we'll go on to the review in a second, and before that we'll hear from your patron. Not that he's here live, because he would upstage us, and I can't have that. I've done my hair specially. So what we'll do is we'll go and talk about the annual review. We'll use a few of the pages there for you to sort of again broaden on World Land Trust and the work that it does.
Yep.
So if you give us a sec, I'll just share screen and we'll hear from your patron.
No problem. Yep.
Just saving a single species, of course, is important, but it's only important because it's an indication of something. So what you need if you're going to conserve the wildlife of the world is land. The World Land Trust knows that if that land in that remote part of the world is to be saved, the people who can save it are the people who live there, who know what the problem is, the people who have the enterprise and the conviction to do something about it. the money given to the World Land Trust, in my estimation, has more effect on the wild world than almost anything I can think of. So World Land Trust, in my estimation, is leading the way. In my estimation, the support given to the World Land Trust is support that goes as directly to the place where it's needed, to the people, not here, not in any other capital city of the Western world, but to the people who live on that land, who will care for the land in the way that only they can and that only they understand.
Clearly, if anybody saw the date on that, it was 2012. And I think, what he said then is true now as it was then, if not more. It's even more important now. And he's still your patron, so he clearly believes in what he says. Yeah.
So we've actually got more footage. There's another video on our YouTube channel called "What Can I Do," which was filmed. I think it was even last year or the end of the previous year, and where he still supports and still believes in what we do and our approach to it. So, and it's fantastic to have him a patron, and we're incredibly lucky to have Steve Backshall as a patron, and Chris Packham and David Gower, and we've got some other high-profile supporters who absolutely believe our approach is the right way. And I think it's also, to be clear as well, is that this isn't me or any of us saying that our approach is the only way. I think it's important that there are different methods. There's different methods of conservation, because I think is that, actually sounds a bit like a cliche, there's a common goal. So what we need to do is we need to find different ways of doing it. So, you've got great organisations who are those advocates, and they're lobbying governments and things like that. And, and that's their style, and that's the way they do it, and that's Grendel, and that's what they need to do. You've got people who are very species focused, but we take this approach to land, because that's we think is the method that is most appropriate and where we can have our biggest impact for an organisation like us.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, because there are organisations that sort of campaign against government. There are organisations that do science, like the British Trust for Ornithology. There are organisations that look after just single species, and then of course there's something like yourselves. So yeah, they all do fit sort of hand in glove. So what I'd like to do is just talk about your annual review, which I received a couple of weeks ago. Always interesting reading, and I've picked out just a few graphics from it. Okay. And I think if we start with this one, I think this would give people a really good understanding as to how the World Land Trust works. We will talk a little bit about keepers in the wild towards the end, and also I'd like to do a specific piece on that, because I think the importance, and the role they play can't be underestimated. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I think we'll do a separate piece on that, but we will touch on it during this interview. But if you could just talk us around some of these other slides, and the next slide, as I'll just give you a quick reminder, is the one of where you've actually, basically been involved in sanctuary. So if you need me to flick to that slide at any stage, just mention it.
Yeah, no, we'll do. Yeah, no, we can go in order. So basically, with all of these things, is for us, it's actually about the impact, and are we having an impact? But what's always good to do is demonstrate, because we want to be really clear with donors what we've done and what's happened. So when we say we've done, is that actually our donors have enabled us to fund international partners to do it. So we've now got 22 project partners, around the world. No, I've got that wrong. Actually, it's 30 partners around the world. I was getting these the wrong way around. So we've got 30 partners around the world in 21 countries. So, and with them, what we do is we go through this process of different fundings and different funding mechanisms we've got. But we talk about land, and we talk about land being this important thing, and the most important thing. Now, what we like to do and be really clear on is the bit that we've done and the bit we funded. So this figure of 881,000 acres, is what has been directly funded by World Land Trust in terms of land protection. So if you considered what that's leveraged, you're into the millions, and what our partners protect is even greater than that in total. But what we want to talk about is we just want to show the impact that we have as an organisation. We're not there to claim the recognition for everybody else's hard work as well. So we think that's the right approach for us as well. So last year, out of that, we directly funded a total of 38,000 acres in 2089 in these countries that we'll go on and have a look at in a moment. So that gave funding to 22 projects, 2 projects in countries, and with 82 reserves that funded as well in total. So, and then what we've got is we also take tree planting as well. So our first port of call is protecting standing forest, and standing forest being what we believe is the right thing to do, the first thing to do. So protect what's there, because what that does, it protects a habitat that's already in place. It's got it's already got mature trees that are absorbing carbon and providing home for different species. It's also storing carbon, it's locking carbon in, it's protecting all sorts of things like that. So that's our first thing. If we can't do that, then we do some tree planting through reforestation projects. And because if you haven't protected it, then let's try and restore it. So, and with that, we've last year we planted 39,000 trees, which, with some of the figures that were being bandied around during elections and things like that, that might seem quite small, because there was people talking about planting 700 million trees in a short space of time, which I think there's complications around that by doing that. But last year we planted 39,000 trees, and we've now planted over 2 million trees in our timeline. So, which on our approach to tree planting again is about, it's not just about sticking a tree in the ground, it's about working with our partners to look for to grow the right seeds. So collecting seeds, growing up the immature plants, planting them out, and then looking at the management of them until they're kind of ready to look after themselves. So we think that's how we manage our tree planting. So.
Right, just before we move on to the next slide, you mentioned the funding there, and you mentioned sort of partners. I think it would be just good to just give a little bit of an insight into your funding model and how that actually works, because I know you have sort of corporates and then you have friends. So can you give us a little bit of an idea around your funding?
Yeah, so our funding, what we're trying to do is we're trying to give as many options as we can, so to ensure that funds go to what they want to be funding. Now, so we have lots of different funding streams and different funding mechanisms. So whether it's buying land, whether it's funding ranges, whether it's planting trees, or whether it's carbon offsetting, ultimately all of those things are about conservation. So they're about long-term management, and they're about providing natural climate solutions to this climate issue that we've got now. And our funding comes from different methods. So we have individual donors, and we've got some incredibly generous people in this country, as we've seen on lots of things that are going on, certainly at the moment, with support for the NHS and all of those kind of. So the UK's got some very generous people.
Yeah,
which we're hugely grateful for at World Land Trust. We also work with, we've got around about 200 corporates, businesses that we now work with, who of different scales, so different sizes and different ways that they work with us. So we have funding coming through that. Then we have some like trusts and foundations. We have our Friends scheme, which is people who pay by direct debit monthly to support the organisation. And that gives us, for us, that's amazing, because that gives us a chance to kind of plan a little bit further ahead, and also gives us flexibility, because that goes to our action fund. So we have kind of lots of different mechanisms and different funding streams to World Land Trust. The only thing that we don't have is we have no government funding. So there's no government funding at all for the organisation. Right.
Right. So as an individual sitting there watching this, they can get involved in the Friend scheme. So is that a monthly amount, or, you know, is that anything that they want to give? How does that work?
So what we ask for is a minimum of £5 a month. So they can sign up to £5 a month. They become a World Land Trust friend. That will be recognised. The funds will go directly to the Action Fund, which allows us to support our most urgent projects. And you know, in recent weeks, that has been invaluable because we want to continue to support our partners where we can. They receive our newsletter. They'll receive updates from the organisation, and they're in control of it. You know, so there's no kind of if they want to take a break. And, you know, so, for example, during these periods, if they want to take a break, that's no issue at all. They can do that. So what we try and be is we try and be as flexible and try and build relationships. You know, we've still got friends who have been there from the very beginning of World Land Trust, from when it first started. So, and for us, that's amazing. What we do is we try to build relationships. We're not an organisation who will, if you become a friend, you're going to get an email from us every 5 minutes asking for money or to upgrade your monthly amount. You're in total control of that. That's something for you. You know, if you don't want to receive our mailings, you don't want to receive stuff through the post, that's your call. You know, that's entirely up to the individual. So we're really proud of the fact that as an organisation, we don't put pressure on anybody. You know, my belief is, and there's a guy called Ken Burnett, he's also a trustee of World Land Trust. We're a charity, so people know what World Land Trust needs help with. Yeah. So we don't need to keep asking. So what we do is, our job is to inspire and let people know what's happening. If we do that well, then hopefully people will donate. But you're not going to get telephone calls from us. You're not going to get hundreds of letters asking for more and more money out of you. You know, we have a very realistic approach. I kind of work on the theories that I can be quite intolerant of those kind of things, so I wouldn't want to do it to anybody else. So
exactly.
So,
exactly. So, and we'll talk now about sort of where that money goes and what land and where. So yeah, if you could give us a bit of an overview of these.
Yeah, so there's a lot of projects there. So and these are all with long-standing partners, you know. So as I was saying, we've got these 31 partners around the world. So, and we're not funding them constantly, and they're not getting funding all the time. So this is what we were working on in last year, so 2019. So, you know, we've got, you know, we can work our way around. So in Borneo, land, we've been doing land purchase there for a while, and actually it was the project where it was our first £1 million project that we put into place, where protecting, we were creating a corridor in by the edge of the lower Kinabatangan River in Sabah, obviously home to things like orangutans, pygmy elephants, hornbills, proboscis monkey, but obviously a habitat that's huge rates of deforestation because of things like palm oil. So also, I think you might have adapted this, or I hope you have, because the India marker has moved. So there, it's about creating corridors again, wildlife corridors, and we've just put up some images on our Twitter feed actually of elephants using the corridors, and we've got tigers showing through there. Once again, it's working with a partner called Wildlife Trust of India, who are this amazing organisation, and they work with local communities about resolving things like human-wildlife conflicts as well. So it's about really involving communities and the local people in these projects all the way through. Armenia, amazing habitat again. So up in the Caucasus Mountains, place was heavily hunted. So there, we're actually funding, we've been buying some land, and we've also been funding leases as well, where actually some of those leases are from once again, local mayors in communities, and the money goes back into the villages. And one project where provided the first lighting for that village, first street lighting. So, and then you get over to, we've got projects in Africa. I think we're going to come on to one of those in a moment, where we're funding several partners there. So we've got Kenya, Zambia, and we've got a couple more coming online this year as well. But a lot of our work, as you'll see, is in kind of Central and South America. And historically, it was, the reasons were because of the impacts that are happening there. So the threats to those landscapes, so large areas of deforestation. So as an example, Paraguay wasn't on there this year, but that's got a rate of deforestation. I think it's something like it was about 15,000 hectares a month of land being cleared for agriculture, basically. So to grow soya or to feed cattle.
Yeah.
So yeah, so so we're still supporting these projects. And I know you've spoken to the guys at Regua who've got this amazing project. I think it's about 90 kilometers from Rio. Just a stunning habitat. They've done a lot of work around reforestation, have you heard, and we've helped fund projects there. But then, Mexico, once again, another amazing project in Sierra Gorda Biosphere, where they're working incredibly hard. And actually, we've just had a really interesting news story on our website where there's been a recent fire there, which had to work on putting out, which obviously has its complications with the current climate in terms of lockdown and things like that. So, but ultimately, once again, all the projects are effectively about land purchase that you can see on there. It's about helping to support our partners purchase land, put it under protection, and provide a home for biodiversity, provide habitats for local communities, and also several of the projects are providing watershed projects as well, providing water to villages as well. So yeah, so kind of all incredible projects, and I could sit here and talk about all of them in great detail, and wax lyrical about them, because we just before all of this happened with coronavirus, we were actually in Guatemala with about 25 of our partners having a symposium. And you come away from it and you can't help be inspired when you hear the stories of what they're doing and some of the complications they're dealing with in those projects. So
yeah, and just because there's obviously a big dot that's sort of covering the UK. That's a whole of the UK. Yeah, it's not your head office, and it's also not an oversight that you haven't put a link to that. That's because you explain it. Is it because it didn't get particular funding in 2019? But just so people are aware, you do have land that you support in the UK. So can you give us just 2 minutes on that one as well? Yeah,
so we, like I said, we've got our office in up in Suffolk, but we've got one small reserve down in Gloucestershire called Kites Hill. Now, the story behind that was she was a potential donor that went out to a project with John, spent some time with John, and kind of came back and liked our approach to how we manage land. And actually, next to her house, she had a lot of land, and it backed onto an SSI, and there's this kind of really beautiful kind of meadows and beach woodland, which she left to us at the time as a living legacy, because what she wanted to do was provide that to World Land Trust and have World Land Trust manage that land. And actually, what John did at the time, the thought process was, well, actually, look, there's a whole load of UK organisations doing incredible things. So actually, let's concentrate our efforts overseas. But what we can do through this particular piece of land that we've been provided is we can kind of demonstrate how we do things on a global scale in the UK. So what we do is we work with local, at the time it was a local volunteer organisation, and now we're kind of building relationships with the local wildlife trust there. We work with the local farmer who grazes the land for us and things like that. So what it is so it gets funding from us every year, but kind of on a small scale, enough to kind of maintain this land and, you know, put in things like signage and put in like paths so people can visit it. But all it is, it's just a demonstration of how World Land Trust could work and how we work on a much bigger scale.
Yeah. And speaking of bigger scale, these were some of the projects that you picked out in your annual review.
Yep.
And obviously the staggering amount of money there that was raised for these. So yeah, I think it's worth just sort of talking a little bit about these and giving people a bit of context around them while I just look at that picture, basically.
Yeah, so well, let's start with the picture. So the blue-throated hill star. So this is a species of hummingbird that was actually discovered really quite recently. So in the grand scheme of things, and we were approached by our partner to help fund a project there to put some of this lab habitat and the area which they've been seen, put some levels of protection into that area. Now, for us, that was a great project, and as me as a birder was quite excited by the prospects of a new hummingbird species as well. And actually, that project just took off, I think we funded that one in kind of a record time for World Land Trust. Actually, it was a species that captured people's imagination, and you can kind of understand why. And what's interesting is that we've got several partners in Ecuador, and you know, this was with NCE. Now our other partner from the Kachinokotoko, they're doing a project around the hill star as well, so about protecting that landscape. So what they're trying to do is we're trying to help our partners kind of create this really amazing environment for this habitat for this, and protect the habitat for this species to thrive in. You know, especially now, not just because it's been discovered, but we would have been doing that anyway. But it kind of became even more urgent when this hill star was found, because there's so few of them. They don't actually really know how many there are. So the numbers and the estimates are really small. So it became important that once you've discovered it, and to make sure that you protect it. And kind of let's work our way up. So the Jungles for Jaguars was basically going back to the country where World Land Trust did its first project in Belize. So we were working with another partner where it was creating a corridor between two protected areas, which is a kind of a tactic, but it's an approach that we have and our partners have, where they tactically buy land between two protected areas or two areas they've created, try and fill that gap in the middle so you can improve the mobility of these species in those areas. And and if you've got two small protected areas and things don't particularly like to cross, you can kind of end up creating quite small gene pools. So if you join them together, it creates this bigger reserve by just doing the smallest bit that you can. So the Jungle for Jaguars, we're working with our partner over there. It was an area of land that became available, and our partner reacted as quickly as they could. And what we do know is, in terms of jaguars, there was around about 22 jaguars known in that area, and to be using that landscape. Why was it important to protect it? Because if we didn't, there's a good chance it would have been clear cut, it would have been cut down. So there are communities out there that are clearing the land, and once again, it's around agriculture. Our conservation director Richard Cuthbert was out there, and I think it was that they had photographs of a piece of landscape or a piece of forest, and when he was out there, which was 3 weeks later, it had been clear felled, it had gone. So that's the kind of rate that we're dealing with. And we've got an amazing video on our YouTube channel again, which I keep referring to, which shows the level of deforestation we've used satellite footage over about a 30-year period, 25-year period of the rate of deforestation in Belize. So, and it's quite scary, but what it does do is it demonstrates that those reserves are working, and it's important to protect those areas. If not, they will become. Working our way up again, so the catcher, Kenya, once again, it was a piece of the catcher woodland, incredibly important habitat in Africa and in Kenya. Once again, will be cleared, and for us, it was about protecting that landscape and working with that partner. So we wanted to raise the profile of that, and it's one of the ones that we were fundraising for whilst we were at Bird Fair last year. We brought our partner over to talk about that. We worked really close with African Bird Club as well on that particular project. And once again, incredibly successful in terms of the speed that we raised the funds. Last year we were blown away by the support we received, and that we've received at the start of this year as well. I think people have kind of woken up to the issues around climate, and I think that we were, before the thing with coronavirus, I think we were seeing this momentum, and hopefully when we come out of this, as I said at the start, people will remember that and remember the importance of the outside space while they've been kind of locked in, that we need to protect it. So, and then the last one on the list, moving on, is Scorched Earth project, which was actually a reforestation project in Vietnam. So this area, obviously, as you can imagine, was heavily bombed during the war. Lots of primary forest was cleared because of Agent Orange. And what's happened is, because of Agent Orange staying in the ground, basically the only thing that's really kind of grown back is this kind of really tough, really invasive grass species. So that came back and is kind of smothering the growth of anything. So there was kind of lots of attempts to work out how to try and reforest these areas, and a couple of years ago there was some pilot projects done by our partner, and which involved kind of clearing areas and then managing those areas through the where they've planted trees. And what they realized is they can do that, and they could establish new trees in this particular landscape. So what we did is we funded a much bigger scaled up project of that, and this was our kind of main appeal for the end of the year, and this is one that we used as our match funding project as well, where people, everybody who donated their funds were matched by some other generous donors, so almost kind of doubling the impact of their donations. And what was really amazing for me to see is, literally, we finished that project funding. The partners were told about the funding, and then literally straight away we got video footage of them being able to go into that landscape with scythes, with strimmers, start clearing grasses and start planting, and trees were put into the ground straight away. And for us, that's just amazing to see. And it was the end of last year, and I think we're kind of moving towards pretty much all the trees are in the ground now. So, which is just fantastic, So we will watch that grow. We will watch that develop, and and maybe use, I refer back to regular. You use I don't know what, whether Lee spoke about it, but where we helped do some tree planting several years ago. They've just got the first footage of howler monkeys using it, so it's kind of nice to see those things when they establish and things start to use it. So, and that's what we're doing it for. It's not, it's just to allow wildlife to have its space back. Yeah, and
what struck me when I was talking to Lee from Regua was that we talked about a butterfly. And then about a damselfly that were sort of new to science and that have been discovered. And I said at the time, you wouldn't think that something as visible as a butterfly, could go undiscovered. You think that everything that is going to be discovered would live in, say, the leaf litter or the equivalent. And then all of a sudden we talk to you and we're talking about a newly discovered hummingbird species.
Yep.
And you think, this is just amazing that this thing is newly discovered. It just beggars belief that something like that can not have been discovered. And having not been out to some of these places where you have, it's quite difficult to understand and think, well, how can you not know it's there? So
yeah, I think what's interesting is, so if you take Regua as the example, if you think of how much of the Atlantic forest has gone. So I think it's kind of 93% Atlantic forest is gone. So, and that 7% that's left isn't just a big lump of forest, it's still fragmented forest.
Yeah.
But they're still finding new species there. Now, if you go to, for example, the project in Vietnam, some of those areas there, they found new frog species in there, and it's because some of the habitat is quite remote and difficult to get out to. But we've got, this new hummingbirds. We've literally just put a story up last week about a new agave that's been discovered in Mexico. In Mexico, they found new salamander. They found new magnolia. In Ecuador, at Christmas, we had our event down in London, and there was a newly discovered toad named after Steve Backshall.
I bet he's chuffed about that.
Yeah, he was super happy about it. So, and then, and in that same project in Ecuador, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but in very recent times, new discoveries of orchids. And this is what is amazing. We're losing land, at a rapid rate of knots. We're losing species at a rapid rate of knots as well. And the question I kind of ask, and I ask it a lot, and I'm trying to do this through some of my paintings, and I know it's not about my paintings, but for me, it's about at which point do we start to worry about the species that are considered to be least concern? Do we worry about them when they become on the critically endangered list, or do we start to worry about it now? So this philosophy of buying land and protecting land protects an area of landscape for these species that are classified as least concern, but also it's protecting land that's finding species that are newly discovered. It's also protecting land for critically endangered species as well. So I think that's why I think this approach is really important, and I think it's, I can sit and tell lots of stories, but in Guatemala, there was a species of salamander had been found in a reserve called the Jackson climbing salamander, and hadn't been seen for 70 years, and they thought it was extinct. And one day it was rediscovered there. So, and this is why I just think these habitats are hugely important, hugely important, and which is why also the habitats in the UK are hugely important as well, and anywhere around the world, which is why we believe working with the local partners is because they understand these habitats and landscapes and understand the intricacies of them as well. So
yeah, and of course, you can't have this land without being able to contribute to looking after them, and clearly you've got partners on the ground that are doing that. But I know that the one scheme and I know we'll talk in greater detail. Yeah. We'll give this its own interview because it definitely merits it. Is these people, the keepers of the wild, as you call them, so critical to what's happening.
Look, the keepers of the wild are hugely important, to all of the projects. So as we've kind of alluded to, all our projects are managed by our local partners, and they employ local people, and there's lots of reasons for that. As I said, I alluded to a minute ago, they understand the intricacies of the land, they understand all the politics, they understand the true value of the land, and they can get the cost of the land. If we turned up as a UK organiser and said we wanted to buy this, then it becomes a different scenario. And it'd be like, could you imagine, where you live, if an outside organisation turned up and started telling you what to do with your landscape? No, that's not the approach we want. So the Keepers of the Wild form an integral part of that. So these are local people working in the area, working in local reserves, and and some of them have got interesting backgrounds. So some of them have been ex-hunters, but now realise the importance of these habitats and these landscapes and want to do something important about it. So, and that's the reason why they're important. And at the moment, during lockdown, they've become even more important. So as you said, in Mexico, we've seen recently there was a fire. So they've ended up having to go up into the mountains, 2-hour hike up to the top of the mountains to put out a fire, work to do that. In Ecuador, what they're seeing is people leaving the city to go out into the country. So hunting is going up, and hunting and logging is going up because people are looking for a way to make some money or whatever. So they become even more important from that. And that's why with the funds that we've received in this kind of first part of the year, that whilst we're in lockdown, we made a commitment to funding all of the ranges that we fund. So we've sent money to do that so they can keep that going. So they're on the ground, they're still doing what they need to be doing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's it, you know, they definitely merit an interview in their own right, so we can talk a little bit more in detail about what they're doing and the different types of projects. So I think what we'll do is before we end, and this is sort of, indulge me in this.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
A little bit of a personal thing, but I'm sure you'll join me in it. And that is basically to say, you know, look, you know, World Land Trust is absolutely supreme. It's a brilliant organisation. But there's two people that have actually retired very recently, and that I personally would love to sort of say a big thank you to, and that is John and Viv. Seeing what they've done with this so far, it has been, you know, immense. And, you know, I know it's in safe hands, and you can tell us who those safe hands are in a second. But, you know, from my point of view, I just want to say, you know, John and Viv, amazing couple. Love what they've done, and a big thank you to them.
No, absolutely. So I think it's, you know, they would hate this, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've, you know, they've got a long history in conservation, and they had a long history in conservation. John and Viv, you know, they got involved, and they set up the World Land Trust because of his first project in Belize. You know, and their drive and their passion for what they do is still there. So don't think John and Viv are going to stop. So John and Viv are the chief ambassadors for World Land Trust, and Viv's still doing and still supporting us and doing some writing for me as well. And John's still really supporting Jonathan, the new CEO. But you know, I'm grateful to them, because I wouldn't have had a job in conservation, in the conservation world, if it hadn't been for them to have the foresight to look into different areas and different ways to get different skill sets.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm incredibly grateful for that. But what they've achieved, if you look over that period of time, is amazing. They've built up this incredible network of partners who we can't underestimate the value of them and what they achieve together. And what's really important is that they now see themselves as like a conservation alliance, is what we refer to them. So, but that was set up by John and Viv and through John and Viv's vision. You know, we're in a position where World Land Trust at the moment, we are working during coronavirus, and you know, we're lucky that we're still doing that, and that we're all working away. And that's because you know, the World Land Trust has been set up in a way that means it can continue throughout situations like this. But you just have to look at the facts and figures and the numbers of what's happened, and the numbers of species that are under protection. You know, the different approaches to funding. You know, they were World Land Trust, and there's a guy called Roger Wilson who passed away a couple of years ago that we shouldn't forget either, who was integral in some of this in terms of looking at ways that projects can be funded. So we were one of the earliest ones, and one of the earliest NGOs to be doing carbon balancing, a carbon balance program. So it's this approach, which is, you know, they've got to be, there's a lot of recognition for them, and I think there's a lot of respect, and they get a lot of respect from me about it as well. So because they've done an incredible job to set up an organisation that's, you know, 30 years, if you take it as the grand scheme of things, if you take something like an RSPB and the length of time they were running, you know, 30 years is quite a short period. But to do that from your spare room, the drive that they've had, and to have the impacts that they've had, and that it's had, and to put together a team of people, a strong team of people and trustees, is you know, it's nothing but commendable, really. So.
Yeah.
And then just coming on to the next point of, you know, what's happening now. We've got a new CEO. He's been in place for 6 months, Jonathan Barr. So it comes with a really good history in conservation. Done some really interesting projects. So with people like the RSPB and such like. And then there's been some changes in our trustees as well. And we now have a new chairman, Mr. Mark Avery.
Yes, all that.
Yeah, so he's our new chair, and and it's interesting. But what's there is 3 people in the exec team, and a really amazing staff, a really amazing group of people in the organisation who are incredibly passionate about what we do, incredibly passionate about our partners. And I know there's lots of people and lots of organisations so we're not alone in having to change the way we work, but this wasn't something that we're honest, it's something that we weren't initially set up to do. So these people have been working hard, but the guys have just jumped on board and to kind of have minimum disruption to World Land Trust. So it's a real team effort, a huge team effort. But what we've got is, and it's great, Jonathan's come in and believes in the approach as well, and the same approach as us all. So we will look after that ethos of that organisation. So there'll be kind of, as with everything, things evolve and things, but the plan is for us to basically do more of the same.
Yeah, and long may it continue.
With an emphasis on more. We want to do more.
Yeah, that's great. And I've got to go now because I've got some scones in the oven.
Yeah, 100-year-old ones. Can you share that recipe?
Really tough on your teeth.
Yeah.
So, Dan, thank you ever so much.
No worries.
It was a really great insight, and we definitely need to schedule something in to talk about the keepers one, because I really do. You can't underestimate the work that they're doing. So I think to give them their own platform would be really good. So I will leave it there, and I can smell Bernie.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it there, and we will talk in the very near future. So all the best with World Land Trust and what you guys are doing, and speak to you soon.
Yeah, speak to you soon. Cheers, Alan.
Take care. Thanks, Dan.
Bye.